Hello there. Hi. I want to thank my friend very much for bringing to my notice this story that's just come out, article that's just come out in BBC Scotland News. It was published on the 17th of January 2026. I'll put the link below. I'm not going to read the whole article. It's a very tragic story in and of itself, but I think there's a definite link here between this hospital, what happened here, and at the Countess of Chester Hospital. I just had to cough there, sorry. The headline here is Health Board admits fatal infections probably caused by water system. Families have been spending years trying to get answers about why their children have died in this hospital, and there's finally been an acknowledgement by the Hospital Trust, which is in this case the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde Trust, NHS GGC. They use those initials as you go on. I'll just read a little bit. I won't read it all, but I'll put the link below, and I'd really recommend looking at this. And thanks so much again to my friend for telling me about this today. I think it's very relevant to the Countess of Chester, or certainly must be taken into consideration in regard to everything we know about what was going on there to do with the sewage and the water system there, the terrible plumbing and the intractable problems that they had. So just to read a bit from this article, it's by Susie Forrest and James Delaney, published on the 17th of January, so just yesterday. A health board has admitted issues with its water system probably did cause infections. They're hedging their bets, and they're still, after all these years, probably did cause infections in child cancer patients at a major hospital. Again, children are the population, as it were, of patients that are affected here. See, the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde Trust had consistently denied bacteria in the water at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. That's the crucial thing, that's the hospital. Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, QEUH, was responsible for causing some infections which led to the deaths of patients. And how many infections do we have all through the babies on the indictment there? How a huge number, aren't there? A huge number of examples of infection and sepsis, plus what we know about Pseudomonas on the unit through the bulk of that period, if not all of the period of the what you might call the indictment period. They've got Pseudomonas on that unit, and waste coming through the ceilings, even into the sinks, over the floors, affecting hand washing, stuffing nappies into holes in the ceiling because of pipes dripping sewage. You can't imagine it, but that's what was going on there. It says here, however, in the closing submissions to the Scottish Hospitals inquiry, the health board said that there was likely a causal connection between infections suffered by the patients and, quote, the hospital environment, in particular the water system. Now, what have we got a problem with COCH? The water system, the hospital environment. And this story, of course, is a terrible tragedy for the children and their families in and of itself. But I just wanted to talk about this today in relation as well, on its own basis, but also in connection with the Countess of Chester Hospital. Spokesperson for this NHS Glasgow and Clyde said it was supporting the inquiry, while the Scottish government said it's inappropriate to comment. Yeah, that's convenient for them. The probe launched to examine mistakes made in the planning, design and construction. This is it wasn't such an old hospital either. This is a unit, and they name different patients here. I won't read it all, and I won't talk about the names here, but you can look at the article here. But different patients who were young, they contracted, in this particular case, stenotrophomonas. Sorry, I'll try and pronounce that again. Stenotrophomonas bacteria while undergoing treatment for leukemia. So they're already vulnerable. Again, to use as a comparison, as were the neonates in the Countess of Chester Hospital. Some obviously should have been in level 3 units, plus they're in this environment, the hospital environment, where there's all these sewage leaks happening all the time. So very sadly, this poor young child died after contracting this bacteria while undergoing treatment here. And there was another case here. There were other cases. There was a separate corporate homicide investigation into the deaths of 2 other children, as well as the 10-year-old, who was called Millie Main, and 2 other children, and a 73-year-old lady called Gail Armstrong. That was launched in 2021, so this is all quite recent. Last year, prosecutors opened an investigation into the death of a young woman 7 years after she became seriously ill with an infection potentially acquired at the hospital. So a number of people, a number of children and older people have died at this hospital related to the water system. And this is current, it's happened in the last few years, and it's all coming out now, and they've been forced to acknowledge the connection here. But they're still trying to hedge their bets, you see. They're saying here, in a closing statement to the inquiry, the NHS GGC, which is the Glasgow, it's like the trust, the area trust, I think, said that it, quote, broadly acknowledged that there was no definite link between infections and the water system. This is bizarre, this. But then it says, more likely than not, some infections suffered by patients were connected to the hospital's water supply. So they contradict. It's ridiculous. But this is what we're dealing with here. When things have gone wrong, they won't be accountable. It says here, the NHS, despite that other almost like retraction above there's no definite link. It says here, another quote from the NHS says that it accepts that on the balance of probabilities, there is a causal connection between some infections suffered by patients and the hospital environment, in particular the water system. I'm not sure if I need to read any more, or I'll just leave the link to keep this a short video. I'll just have a quick look. Yeah, just a few more little details here, but please look at the link if you would. It says it is more than likely, it goes on to say, this is the NHS statement where they've finally been cornered, as it were. It's more likely than not that a material proportion of the additional environmentally relevant BSI, bloodstream infections, you can tell that like lawyers have written all this, haven't they, in the paediatric hemato-oncology population between 2016 and 2018 had a connection to the state of the hospital water system. So we're best part of 10 years down the line here. Look at the time framing, it's not that far off. 2015, 2016 in Countess of Chester Hospital, 2016 to 2018 here. And it also says the health board added there'd been a steady decrease in the rate of infection after remedial measures on the system had commenced. And what else happened at the Countess of Chester Hospital? An extension was built, and they moved into that, and they left those old rooms empty, and now there's a whole new mother and baby building, isn't there? So that a similar thing kind of happened, really. There were remedial measures. Well, they just basically got out of that old area, didn't they, very quickly, as well as reducing the unit to a level 1 as well, so the babies aren't quite as vulnerable as the ones that had been there in 2015 and 2016 in particular. Let's just see if there's anything else to read. It goes on to say and talks about a lady speaking who's a mother of one of the children that has very tragically been passed away because of these infections. And she's saying here, as a mother, I've spent 6 years fighting for answers that should have been given at the very beginning. I foresee this happening with the Countess of Chester Hospital once Lucy Letby is exonerated. They'll have to be looking into all this, and it'll all come back. Just like with Evans's past will come back, the history of the Countess of Chester Hospital neonatal unit will come back, and all those problems with the sewage will all come back onto the front page. And when those families that very sadly lost children and his children were injured through crashes and caused permanent harm in some cases, that will all be part of medical negligence cases in the future once Lucy Letby has been exonerated as well. and some of those cases were going in that direction anyway back in 2017. Some of the parents, I think from memory, this is something that Jenny helped me find, that on one of the Thirlwall documents, Jenny helped me find this, Jenny of JAR 942, the channel that Jenny's recently started. And parents of babies A, and obviously then A and B, but parents of A and B and baby D, they had, via their solicitors back in 2017, prior to any police involvement, they had already requested medical notes from the hospital. That's in one of the Thirlwall documents. So I think I might leave it there, but it goes on with a lot more harrowing detail here, upsetting detail. And some adults really sadly died. A poor young lady called Molly Cudahy died at 23 years old, and there was an older person as well that I talked about before. It's when people whose system is compromised. So and some of the adults were in high dependency units, and I'm just comparing what happened here to really some of those babies were obviously on a high dependency status, weren't they, in 2015, 2016, and they've got all that going on around them with the pathogens and the sewage. I'll leave it there, coming up to 12 minutes. I'll link it below. Please have a look at the article if you would, and share it if you can, the article. And I think this is quite significant in terms of a comparator, and the dates aren't that far off either. Not that it's obviously a different part of it's in Scotland, another country, but it's part of the NHS. So thanks for listening and take care. Bye-bye.